Hello, welcome to our last class of this 2-week period. Who's excited or has any other emotions? I don't know. I don't particularly have anything. I'm just thinking that, okay, I'm done now. I mean, I'm sad. I wish this could go on longer, but whatever, in the end. Tired does count. I agree with that to a certain extent. All right, let me share my screen. This meeting might or might not go under the usual amount. I said that last time as well, but it didn't. I'm not entirely sure. So I guess we'll find out as we go along. Google Chrome. Alrighty. That's not the button I meant to click. Here we are. Okay. All right. So today we're talking about uncertainty in information. If you remember from our first class ever, this was one of the aspects. This was like the second to last aspect or something. Maybe not that, but maybe it was close to the end. And yeah, well, we're talking about it now. So when you're dealing with imperfect information, you're basically dealing with some kind of risk, right? You don't know what's going to happen. If you don't have all the information, there's a chance that something could come out of you from nowhere, right? So that's what imperfect information is. You're dealing with various probabilities of things you don't know might occur. So there's three main ways to deal with risk. So there's sharing risk with others, paying to reduce risk, and manipulating risk. So yeah, so sharing risk. So Farmer A thinks that that's the wrong there. Give me a second. I'm not going to be seen with the wrong there. Can't believe it's a terrible typo. My bad. Let's pull up the chat again. Okay, so Farmer A thinks that their wheat crops may do poorly this year, and Farmer B thinks that their corn crop may do poorly this year. So both farmers decide to come up with a deal such that if one farmer does poorly but the other farmer does well, then the poor farmer gets some more cash just as in a basic insurance policy. And if one farmer is more likely to fail than the other one is, they might skew it such that it's not like a perfect 50-50. They might say, oh, because you're more likely to fail, you get 40% and I'll get 60% of the profits, total profits or something like that. So what are some examples you guys can think of in which this is more like have you guys ever done something like this where you and somebody else did something to share the risk? Or maybe you can just think of some examples in which that occurs. Come on, guys, let's get a few examples. I mean, yeah, it's admittedly not the easiest thing in the world, but I'm sure you guys can think of something. So, yeah, in Catan, you could probably, you say that you could probably do something with Catan and sharing resources. You just say, okay, I might not do well in the next round, you might not do well in the next round. So we'll just pool our resources, and if somebody doesn't do well, then they'll get some basic backup from the other player, and this goes both ways, so then it's fair. Yeah. So my parents offer a reward for completing chores. My siblings and I cooperate and complete the task together and split the reward. So while that kind of works, it's not exactly risk, right? A different example might be that that I see what you're going for, and I think you can slightly change it. So remember, this is for dealing with risk, right? So maybe you and your siblings are nervous that your parents aren't going to like, so each of you has a chore, and your parents aren't going to like how a specific chore is done. So everybody does a little bit of everybody else's chore to make sure that people share the risk in some way. So that might be how you do it. Okay, maybe countries can make deals according to risk. Yeah, that's a good example, right? So two countries, and they aren't exactly sure how they're gonna do it in 1 year economically, so they decide to form like some sort of small like trade deal, and they work things out such that if one of them does poorly, the other one backs them up. Right, exactly. That's a good example. Paying to reduce risk. So now we only have one farmer. Farmer A thinks I again used the wrong there. It's just because I copy pasted it. And I'm going to make sure there's no wrong there here. Nope, there's a wrong there here as well. Yeah, I must have been tired when I made this. I don't know. Anyway, so farmer A thinks that their wheat crops might do poorly this year. So then farmer A pays an insurance company some money so that in the case they do poorly, they'll get some money, and they'll get some money for the insurance company. And I again used the wrong there. So basically, it's just paying for insurance, right? But you should only do this if, so if you're going to pay for insurance, you have to calculate the probability that you will do poorly, right? Then you have to like figure out how much money you stand to lose by doing poorly. And then based on that, you can calculate how much money you're willing to pay for the insurance to get a specific amount of money back. And you want to do this such that even if you do poorly or you don't do poorly, then you should probably get the same amount of money, right? So if you do well, then the paid money you paid for insurance is gone, so you get some amount. But even if you do poorly, the amount you get back from the insurance should be enough such that you get the same amount of money either way. So that's how you should probably, if in real life, that's how you should deal with insurance. So what are some real world examples of insurance? I wonder. I mean, it's okay. Yeah, car insurance so that you don't pay big when you crash. Exactly. Yeah. So you buy a car and you get some specific, like, remember, payoff. I'm just rephrasing this. I don't, just in case. Payoff can be anything. It can even be like a mix of both money and time. So you have like a specific payoff from your car that you get from just driving it. It's convenient, and you pay insurance such that given a scenario, even if you don't crash your car, you're losing money, but you have your car, which is good. But if you do crash your car, you don't have your car, but you still get the money from the insurance, so you should have the same payoff. So another example is like when you get money from specific places in case of an earthquake. Yeah, exactly, right? So you are scared of an earthquake, maybe in like California or something. That place is pretty bad earthquake wise, or Istanbul, that also has pretty bad earthquakes. So you pay insurance to an insurance company just for like property damage or something. And in case of the property getting damaged, you get your money from the insurance company, and you should be able to recoup your losses. So yeah. And the final way is house insurance. Yeah, another example. You have the payoff from your house, and if it catches fire or something, uh, maybe you left the oven on. Be careful don't do that. Don't leave your oven on. Then the insurance company will probably, so in the more you stand to lose because of the risk, the more the insurance should have to pay you. So that's a general rule. When you're an adult and you're buying insurance, I mean, I'm clearly not an adult buying insurance, but we'll all get there eventually. Okay, so the final way is manipulating risk. So farmer A thinks that their wheat crops might do poorly. To combat this, farmer A plants some corn, right? This is similar to the sharing risk, except, yeah, life insurance is another example for the previous thing. Yeah. So this is similar to the sharing risk, except there's no other partner. You're just creating a backup plan in case something goes poorly. So your wheat crop has a % chance. So you should probably make it, whenever, if you're doing something like this, you should probably have it such that the two separate things don't have a high chance of both failing, right? So hopefully if your wheat crop does poorly, then you should assume that your corn crop does well, right? So if you're manipulating risk like this, you have to make sure that all of your options kind of balance each other out. So yeah, what are some examples of this in real life? This is maybe the hardest, but maybe the easiest. Crop rotation, exactly. You know that you may not be able to exercise that day, so you walk to work. That's actually a pretty good basic example. So you have your payoff from exercising, but because you're not sure you'll be able to do it, maybe you have some commitments that you're unsure of, you just walk, right? And then if it turns out that you can't exercise, whatever. But if it turns out that you can, maybe you both walk and exercise. That's a good example, actually, yeah. So yeah, let's move on. Any questions about these three things? I'm being a little bit vague because the math can be a pain. Excuse me for a minute. Just a second. Sorry, I heard a knock. I'm back. There was some knock at the door and I didn't know what it was. Anyway, let's reshare my screen. Google Chrome. There you are. Okay, we're back. Okay, so does everybody understand these previous things? Evan, okay, so I see one. Yeah, is the what referring to me temporarily leaving, or does that refer to the? Okay, yeah, I think we're good. Okay, yeah. So, asymmetric information. So, if players have different knowledge of a situation, both of them can use different tactics to assist them, right? So, a more knowledgeable player, the player who has more information, can conceal information or reveal misleading information, right? This is just, so if somebody asks, let's just take an example of a card game. Suppose somebody has more cards in hand and somebody has less cards in hand, right? So the more knowledgeable player can choose to not tell anybody what's in their hand or to lie. Suppose, you're maybe playing Uno or something and somebody has a large hand, somebody has a small hand, and he says, oh, I totally have a +4 card right now. They might be lying, they might not actually have a +4, and they might just be using it to bluff. They can also reveal selected information truthfully. This is like saying, I have a +4, but they actually do have a +4. So the more knowledgeable player obviously has to balance these out. Otherwise, they're going to lose credibility. And does everybody remember what credibility we talked about last class? Does everybody remember? It's pretty self-explanatory, but just making sure. Does everybody get what credibility is? Know what credibility is from last class? Yes, I see one yes, so I'm going to assume we're good. Okay, so you might think the less knowledgeable player is at a disadvantage. And while that might be true, they actually also have various techniques they can use. So the first one is elicit information or filter truth from falsehood. So if the less knowledgeable player receives information from the more knowledgeable player, they can try to determine whether it's true or false using some method, right? Suppose they know the more knowledgeable player's lying patterns, so they can say, oh, he's telling the truth, or oh, he's definitely lying right now. So that's the first thing. And to elicit information, you know, maybe they'll just say, hey, what's in your hand? Or maybe they'll say, if you tell me what's in your hand, I'll help you out, or something like that. And another option is to just remain ignorant, right? If you are not sure of how the most knowledgeable player acts, you can just specifically just pretend they don't exist, right? And as we discussed last time, remaining ignorant is a very good counter to strategic moves like lying or creating threats, because then the other player knows that you're going to do so and can't threaten you as much. So everybody understand all of this? I see some yeses, so I'm just going to move on. Yeah. All right, direct communication. We're going over cheap talk again, but we're going to go over it in a slightly different context. So yeah, usually the only thing you lose by lying is credibility. Exactly, yeah. There are situations in which lying is, you know, can result in some, you know, worse off cases, but typically in game theory, unless you get more advanced, lying will only cost you credibility. But like, you know, credibility in itself, losing credibility in itself can also cause problems. But in general, in basic game theory, we're only going to talk about losing credibility. Yeah. So direct communication. So words by themselves aren't very credible. And communication without any cost is called cheap talk. Remember, if it doesn't cost you to do anything, if it's just talking with someone, cheap talk is completely pointless, right? It's not provable, and it's kind of useless. So the equilibrium, some games, while having several Nash equilibria, also have a cheap talk equilibrium, right? And in those games, the interests have to be aligned to at least a certain extent. So I'm going to use the same example as last time, except I'm not going to go, you know, as much in depth. So this is the assurance game that we talked about on day 3. And in this case, players A and B are both choosing an activity. So if they both choose to play tennis, then they'll both get a payoff of 10. And if they both choose to go to a coffee shop, they'll both get a payoff of 1. But if they do separate things, then neither of them gets any payoff. So pretty obviously, remember, there's these two Nash equilibria. But in this case, if you use cheap talk, because they have aligned interests, they'll go for the 2 tennis things, right? So they'll get both better payoffs. So this is when there's aligned interest. But what about when there's conflicting interests, right? So this is our, this is just some random example I made. Give me a second. I don't, so yeah. So in this case, there isn't actually a Nash equilibrium, right? So there isn't going to be a cheap talk equilibrium. But another example of a game without a cheap talk equilibrium, but does have some Nash equilibria, is Battle of the Sexes. If you recall, in that game, there's if both players choose the same option, both players will get a good payoff. One player is going to get a slightly higher payoff. So in that case, there isn't really cheap talk equilibrium because both their interests aren't working together. They have conflicting interests. So everybody understands conflicting interests versus aligned interests? Yes, yes, yeah. Okay, adverse selection. So inverse selection is just a technique that is used to, it's just a selecting process, right? If you only want good people to do a specific job, then you'll use adverse selection in order to get these people, right? Because while you don't know an applicant, you know, they can lie on their resume, et cetera, the applicant does like know everything about themselves. So you are at an information disadvantage when you're hiring, right? So you can use adverse selection in order to weed out the good people and leave out the bad people. So there's 2 kinds of adverse selection, signaling and screening, but they're pretty much the same. And they're kind of hard to define. So here's the very long-winded Wikipedia definition that isn't easy to read, and some would argue it's just not fun at all. So Let me read the quote. Yeah, it's a long one, but I'll explain it better. It's just kind of hard to write it down. So it's a game with two players called sender and receiver. Sender is S and receiver is R. The sender can have one of several types. The sender's type is T, determines the payoff function of the sender. It is private information of the sender. It is not known to the receiver. So back to our job example. The sender is the applicant and the receiver is the employer. So the sender can either be like a good employee or a bad employee, and that's just denoted as T. So, and the payoff for the sender, so if a good player takes a good job, then they'll probably get something good. But if a good low skill person goes to a high skill job, they'll probably still get an okay outcome, but not great. So it is the private information of the sender, does not know by the receiver. This just means that only the job applicant knows how good they are, right? The job, the employer doesn't know how good the applicant really is. So the receiver only has a single type. So by assumption of common priors, their payoff function is known to both players. Basically, this just means that the receiver the receiver's payoffs are known to everybody, and the receiver isn't special at all. So the game has two steps. The sender plays the first step. They can play one of several actions, which are called messages. And there's several messages. And the receiver plays the second step. After viewing the sender's messages, the set of all possible, they can do some action. The two players receive payoffs depending on the sender's type and the message chosen by the sender and the action chosen by the receiver. So that sounds pretty complicated, but it's basically just a weird sequential almost game, like a weird almost sequential game. It is a game. So basically, let's go back to let's move on. I'll explain it later. So screening. So this screening game is a two-player principal agent type game using economic and game theoretical modeling. Principal agent problems are situations in which there are two players whose interests are not necessarily matching each other, but where complete honesty is not optimal for one player. This will lead to strategies where players exchange information based on their actions, which some degree noisy. The ambiguity provides the other player. Again, very long, but kind of pointlessly long. That's just how Wikipedia kind of works. This is basically the same thing, but now players can actually kind of talk to each other. Cheap talk is more possible here. So what does this all mean? So let's really dive into our job example because the definition is super confusing. I'll admit it. It took me a few times. When I first learned this, I had to read it over a couple times. It's weird, but let's go over it. So consider two kinds of people. There's low-skilled and high-skilled job applicants. And there's two kinds of jobs. There's low-skilled jobs and there's high-skilled jobs. So we're going to act as the employer, and we want as many high-skilled people and as few low-skilled people to join the high-skilled job, right? We want all the low-skilled people to join the low-skilled job. So how do we do this? How do you guys think we make sure that none of the low-skilled people join the job that's not meant for them so that we can do the best? All right, yeah, exactly. All three of you got it correct. Give a task, make a test only completable by high-skilled people, or make a test that requires skill. Exactly, yeah. That's exactly what we do. So we create a prerequisite, a test, such that low-skilled people are trying to meet the prerequisite, lose enough payoff to not want the high skill job, but rather the low-skilled job. So basically what this means is that we suppose we say that, okay, before the big trainings, before you can join the job, you first have to go through a training regimen to prove that you're good enough at a baseline, right? So for a high-skilled person, it might only take like a few days, but for a low-skilled person, maybe it takes a super long time. And at that point, they've lost so much of their time that they basically say, no, you know what? This is worse for me than it is to join the low-skilled job. So I'm going to join the low-skilled job. But we also want to make sure it's also not bad for the high-skilled job, right? We want to make sure that for them, they'll still think, okay, this training is hard, but it's still better for me to join the high-skilled job rather than the low-skilled job. So in this case, let's go back to our very annoying long definition. The messages is just the test, right? You can say, okay, you can either join low skill job and not deal with the test, or join the high skill job and deal with the test. And the receiver, our job applicant, can do the set of possible actions is either, okay, I'm going to apply for the low skill job, or okay, I'm going to apply for the high skill job. So does everybody understand this? The reason I'm not doing it with numbers is because when you do it with the numbers, it gets very, very numbery. And, you know, I wanted the only really number lesson to be lesson 4. So yeah. But if you're interested in this, this is something that I'd recommend looking at. So, but does everybody understand this at a basic level? Because this is the semi-basic version of this. Oh my God, why is there so much stuff going on? Excuse me for another second. I'm back. All righty. So share screen, please just do it. Enough with the distractions. Okay. Any questions? Nope. No spoilers. There's tons of weird stuff going on. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah. But enough discussion about where my location is. Do we all understand adverse selection? Yeah, we understand. Okay, I'm gonna. Yes, I'm recording this at the moment. So when this is done, you'll be able to look at that. Yeah. All right. So we're technically done now. Yay. This is pretty short, the length of all of this. Where can we find the recordings? The Wave YouTube channel should have them if they've been properly uploaded. I'm not sure. Yeah, that was short. Well, we're not done. We've got more technical stuff. So now, so technically the class is done, right? So what can I do? You know, I want to explore further topics in game theory. Well, I'm just going to go off a couple of things and quickly describe them, and then hear your guys' opinion on that. Yes, I've been recording every class. Don't worry, every class is recorded. Okay, so first thing that's pretty interesting, auctions. So what kinds of auctions are there? How do they operate? What kinds of auctions benefit the buyer? And what kind of auctions operate the seller? And what auctions make people bid honestly? And what auctions make people think about the rest of the bidders, right? So let's name some auctions real quick. What are some different kinds of auctions that you know about? Um, Not exactly. So Adlin says valuable item auctions. I mean, I guess, but I am talking about more like how the auction works rather than what's being sold. Um, so I'm just going to go through a few of them. So first of all, there's your very standard, the auction you first think of when I say auction, right? So there's an item that's, there's an item being sold. Everybody has a price they want to Yeah, pay for a certain item, and if a person wants to raise the bid, then the price is raised. Yeah, that's the very first auction you probably think of, right? So this auction, so does this benefit the buyer or does it benefit the seller? So I'm surprised somebody knows what a Dutch auction is. Those are weird, and I will talk about them because those are actually pretty cool. But so the way the traditional auction works is that so everybody has a pay, so remember for every auction, every person who's bidding has a maximum price they're willing to pay, right? So they're going to pay. So in this case, whenever a buyer wants an item, they are going to bid until they either get their item or they reach their max, right? Because there's no point of going past your max because at that point you're losing payoff. So, yeah, in that case, so in this case, this makes people bid honestly, right? There's no reason for you to go over your limit. And while you might sometimes go under your limit, if there's multiple people, you're probably, if you get your item at your very max limit, right? So this is going to make people bid honestly in this case. So the next one is Dutch auction. So the way this works is that, so you have an item at an obscenely, so you have some random item, right? But the starting bid is an obscenely high price, right? So then the person running the auction starts dropping the price incrementally, right? And then at some point, somebody's going to say, I'll buy it. And in which case they take the item and they pay however much the bid had dropped down to. So in this case, this actually so do you guys think that this will make bidders bid honestly? Or do you think that bidders will try to do some sneaky stuff in this case? I see one sneaky stuff and I see one honestly. Well, it's actually sneaky stuff, believe it or not. Yeah, I thought this, when I first heard of this, I would think, oh, they're going to be honest, but not necessarily, right? So in this case, so as the auction goes down, you are, remember, because it's going down, you are thinking about the rest of the room. And you are thinking, okay, maybe I can see if this will go down below my maximum price so I can get even more payoff, right? So as the price goes down, maybe even when it reaches your maximum, you're going to let it go down a little bit until you think that the room is about to say, I want it. Somebody else will say, I want it. And right before then, you'll say, I want it, right? So in this case, this is going to make players not act honestly, but rather be try some more interesting stuff. So any other auctions that people can think of? There's a ton of auctions, and if you guys don't know them, then yeah, I do. So don't worry if you don't. There's actually, I think there's two I can think of at the top of my head, but there's probably more. So what kind of sneaky stuff? You just try to scope out the room, right? As the price goes down and down, you try to figure out how much is the person who is willing to, how much is the next person behind me willing to pay, right? So you try to go just at that and pay for that. So suddenly you're not paying your maximum outcome, you're paying something lower than that in some scenarios. So yeah, any other auctions people know of? Yeah, that's considered sneaky. Honestly, basically means that in a lot of scenarios, in a perfect scenario, you're going to pay your maximum amount. And sneaky basically means you're going to try to undercut that. So that's our weird, confusing definition, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so I guess people don't know the other kinds of auctions, which, I mean, honestly, I didn't either. So we'll go through them. So the next kind of auction that we'll talk about is so there's two kinds of sealed auctions. So a sealed auction basically works like this. So the auction for sale is, put on a pedestal or something. Everyone says, okay, write down a price, and just write down a price. We'll deal with that price later, because for different kinds of sealed auctions, different things happen with that price. So everybody writes down that price at the same time, right? So other kinds of auctions were sequential. So I don't know about you, but getting stuff for free seems pretty maximum payoff to me. It is. So the sneaky stuff, and honestly, sneaky stuff does not mean you're trying to do something weird with your payoff. Sneaky stuff simply means that you try to understand how the rest of the room is going to bid. That's what my weird sneaky stuff definition is. So anyway, back to sealed bid auctions. So everybody just writes down a number, and then they insert it, and then whoever paid the most is going to get their the item, right? But let's first go over a second price sealed auction. So everybody writes down a price, and whoever wins doesn't pay the price they put down, but rather the price right after them, right? So suppose I'm selling this cord, right? And you are willing to pay $60 for it. So you write down $60, but the person, and then it says, say you got the most, but you don't actually pay that $60. You pay what the person behind you bid, right? Suppose the person behind you bid $40, then you only have to pay $40. So do you guys think that this will make people do sneaky stuff or make people think honestly?
Sneaky stuff.
You see, okay.
Wait, then you can like bid a lot of money, and then the person in front of you has to pay all of it.
All right. So it's actually honest, believe it or not. Yeah, it's not sneaky. So it's kind of this weird thing, but let's talk about it. So as you said, suppose you just bid a whole ton, right? Suppose you just say, okay, I'm going to pay $1 bajillion, right? So again, let's use our cord. Suppose you say, okay, I'm just hopefully, I don't think other people are going to value this cord. I'm just going to pay $1 bajillion and pay whoever the person behind me is. Well, suppose the person behind you actually wants to pay $1 bajillion for the cord, right? You only value the cord at $60, but even though but because you wrote this huge amount, if there's someone behind you who is actually above your actual amount, suddenly you have to pay that much money, right? And you don't want that, clearly. So you don't want to do that. And suppose you bid under your maximum amount, right? So you say, okay, I value this at $60, but I'm going to be sneaky and go under. Well, in that case, if somebody wants it more than you do, they're going to get it and only pay as much as you wrote down. So in that case, it is actually better to be honest. So this a weird concept.
But then you can just pay like $1 bajillion so the person behind you has to pay a lot of money.
But you are still the one purchasing it, right? If you are the top, remember, you're still buying it. So the way, let me go over how it works. So there's this item that is being sold. You write down how much you're willing to pay, hypothetically. And then if you win it, you don't pay that hypothetical amount. You pay the amount that's one spot down. So in this case, you actually have to pay honestly, such that you pay your maximum amount, and you don't try any sneaky stuff. So the last auction I'm going to talk about is first bid sealed auction. So this is pretty similar to the previous one, but you write down an amount, but instead of paying the person behind you, you just pay the amount you wrote down, right? So if I say, okay, I want this for $60, I write down $60, I get it, I pay $60. So yeah, and exactly, you can't bribe because then you'll lose money too. So do you think, so in our new scenario, in which case you just pay the amounts you wrote down, do you think you'll be sneaky or honest? All right, I have two guesses. One is honest and one is sneaky. And the answer is sneaky. This is super weird. It's like auctions are very non-trivial. And I could do like several lessons over this, but I'm just going over the very basics. So, oh, wow, I better start going over the basics a bit faster. So the reason it's sneaky is that if you're just paying the amount you're willing to pay, if you can just kind of scout out, however, someone might pay more if I sneak. But you have to be careful when you sneak. You don't just choose a random price. You try to understand what the maximum price is, And suppose you like have perfect knowledge, right? You know the max amount somebody's willing to pay for the cable, and somebody's willing to pay like $30, right? If it's worth $60 to you, then you just go one over them and you pay 31, and suddenly you've made a ton of money. And that's an incredibly hypothetical situation. But if you're pretty accurate when you're sneaking, you can get a lot more payoff than you would normally. So yeah, those are auctions. There's more kinds of auctions, but I think it's pretty interesting because it's super non-intuitive sometimes. Next thing, voting. I'm going to cover this a lot more briefly because it's a lot more confusing. So what kinds of voting exist? How do they work? Are there more voting systems that are more fair than others? No. Everyone talks about, oh, this voting is more fair than others. None of them are fair. If you have more than 2 people, then it's never going to be fair. If you have only 2 people, yeah, then you just do majority. But if you have 3 people and none of them win the majority, there's no real correct way to handle that. There's several different ways to handle that, but none is really correct. So I'm not going to agree with that statement, and I'm not going to say it out loud. So how can someone manipulate a vote so that their preferred result occurs? So this is another interesting topic. So I'm just going to go over the 2 voting ways I can come up with. So we're always dealing with 3 candidates, right? So one of the first ways you probably think of is whoever gets the most votes, right? So you have candidate 1, 2, and 3, and suppose it's split like 20, 20, 30, 30, 30, 40, right? So both of these candidates tie, and this candidate has the most, right? But our candidate who got 40 still doesn't actually get the majority. He has less than majority, but he still has 40%, right? So what do you do in that case? And that's, so this way of in this method of voting, you just go with the most first off. This is pretty bad. It's pretty easy to do, but it's not that good because if there's like, suppose there's like a bunch of candidates. Suppose we have like 5 candidates, and it's like 20, 20, 20, 19, 21, right? This guy only won by 1 more point than like 3 people behind him, right? Does he deserve to win? Probably not. So there's that. That's why that voting system isn't really that good. Another way of voting, I mean, there's tons of different ways of voting. That's probably the easiest one. The other ones involve like charts and stuff, and we're running out of time and I don't want to pull up any charts. So yeah, let's move on. Repeated games. What games can be repeated meaningfully? What games what should players do to benefit total payoff over the course of multiple games, and do the number of games matter? So some games, if you repeat it, I mean, there's no real point. Yeah, like suppose we repeat assurance, right? Great, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you're just always going to pick the best thing. But I mean, the main one is Prisoner's Dilemma. That's really cool to repeat. But here's the interesting question. Does the number of games in Prisoner's Dilemma and the repeated Prisoner's Dilemma matter? And that's a very interesting question. And I'm not going to actually, what do you guys think? Does the number, okay, come up with an idea. How does the number of games matter? Not just does it, obviously it does, but how does it matter? So one person says yes, but with no explanation, and then some person says no, it just matters when people switch, if they do. So I'm not sure what that means, but the answer is yes. But here's the interesting part. So it's not the number of games. It doesn't matter in the way you probably think it does. If both players know when the game is going to end, then it's going to, so just search it up, but here's a hint, because I can't exactly recall the nice, clean proof, and it's very interesting. But the secret is, if you have a specifically finite number of games, then it's going to be the same all throughout, and if you specifically infinite number of games, it's going to be the same all throughout. But if you don't know how many games are going to occur, that's when it becomes interesting. If neither player knows how many times the game is going to repeat, that's when you use strategies. But if you know how many times the game is going to repeat, then there's no point, because then you can just use backwards induction. So search up repeated Prisoner's Dilemma. That's pretty cool. Evolutionary game theory. I was considering many things from my textbook to put in this class. This is the one thing that I just said no. I'm not putting this in the class because it is much too annoying to describe. I don't know how my game theory teacher did it. All I know is that, I think he just pulled a miracle, and I'm not going to steal his slideshow. So given enough time and several kinds of players with different strategies, how many of each kind of play will exist in the steady state? Basically, if you have like foxes and rabbits, and foxes eat some rabbits, rabbits run away, on average, how many foxes will there be and how many rabbits will there be? So this is basically just a more complex, repeated game, and it's so annoying to do. It's just a pain. If you like weird math and optimization, go for that. But I liked it. It's just super hard to explain. Angel problem. So these games, you can probably kind of understand how they go back to the previous things we've discussed in this class, right? Evolutionary game theory and repeated games. These are just sequential games mixed with simultaneous games. You just mix the two kinds of games. Voting, that's just some kind of weird sequential game or simultaneous game. Auctions, that's just some weird simultaneous game. Let's get into some interesting things. The marriage problem, the angel problem, and the stable matching problem, or problems. So the better strategy will have more players who use it. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. But not necessarily. Yeah, the slide before. It's survival of the fittest in the end, right? Whoever has the best strategy will probably live out. If somebody has a strictly better strategy, then there's an entire chance that the other strategy will go extinct. So yeah, let's quickly go over the angel problem, because this is super cool. And it's also a real paper. So if you're going to read this, I recommend you get some help from somebody. I don't really know who. If you have a parent who knows this kind of stuff, I'd recommend you check it out. So these are all words. Okay, so basically the angel problem, we have this grid, and the angel, so we have two players, right? We have the angel and the devil, and they're on an infinite grid. So the angel can move anywhere. So the angel is like a square of size something, right? And they're in the middle, and they can move anywhere within this square. And the devil can move anywhere over the grid, but when he moves somewhere, when he lands on a square, the angel isn't allowed to move there anymore, right? So the devil's goal is to trap the angel in a circle such that the angel can't move anymore. Not can't move, but such that the angel is completely enclosed in like a circle of unusable squares, so that the angel is confined, basically. So do you guys understand that? It's an interesting problem, and I probably didn't explain it super well. If not, I'll just, I know a way I can explain it better. I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to assume people are just confused.
Wait, then the angel is gonna be easy to win.
That's what you would think, but you have to remember this is on an infinite sized grid, right? There is no end, and both players, there's just infinite time. So, so every square the devil steps on becomes contaminated. Exactly, yeah. So yeah. So who do you think will win? Do you think the angel will be able to just continuously escape the devil, or do you think the devil will win? So somebody says the devil. Devil will eventually win. Devil should win eventually, right? Devil. Everyone's saying the devil. Well, so everyone's probably first thought, like when I first thought of this problem, like, okay, so the angel can go anywhere. It's probably going to be the angel. Then I thought about it more. Then I'm like, okay, then it's probably the devil. And it left at the devil. It turns out it's actually the angel, and it's super confusing. And I don't actually understand the math because it's like grad student, like it's university stuff. So, and I'm not even sure it's a complete proof. So it's this weird method of, if you could, I don't know where the proof of the actual problem is, but like of the solution is. I tried finding it and I couldn't find it out. but in the end, I'm pretty sure the angel does win. So yeah, there is some way the angel moves that the devil that won't allow the devil surrounding it. But it's not as simple as just going in one direction. So this paper by the late John Conway, he died earlier this year, unfortunately, which was pretty sad. This guy's really like a really important like mathematician and stuff. But so again, another thing you can do is just search up this guy. So this paper just goes over several different like strategies that the angel could do, that in which case the devil wins. Like suppose the angel goes in only one direction, then the angel is just, then the devil can plan, you know, if the devil knows that the angel is going to go in one direction, the devil can surround it, right? And there's tons of different things like that, in which case the devil can win. So I really recommend you read this paper. I'm going to put this into our ed page. If you don't understand anything, don't worry. It's pretty complicated stuff. If you maybe get some help from your parents or somebody who might know. But this is a really cool problem. So the next thing is the stable matching problem, stable matching problems. So we're kind of running out of time, so I'm just gonna briefly go over this. I actually made this presentation with a couple of other people. So let me just quickly present. This is a bit more complicated just because it has more definitions, but this has like a for sure answer. So yeah. So we define, there's a bunch of cool definitions, but this is just how a more complex game theory thing works. So basically, you're trying to match some men and some women such that they get into some marriages, and you define, so this is the actual marriage is the pairing. So a stable marriage is just so that each person would not rather be with another person. So this is just, this just goes over, this is what another kind of game theory project looks like, right? So you just go over some proofs, and yeah, this was pretty fun. I recommend all of you get into game theory because it is a seriously fun class, and you've already gone this far. So when you start, whenever you start your official schooling, I guess, you already have a very good head start. Simply knowing about simultaneous games and mixed Nash, specifically knowing about how to do mixed Nash will really send you far, because a lot of time is spent on that because it's a bit math heavy. But if you know how to do it, then you're pretty far ahead already. So yeah, there's tons of other problems. So I recommend you check out stable matching because that's fun. So yeah, those are some further topics you can look at. I highly recommend you just search up game theory on Google and see what kinds of problems come up. What if our school doesn't have a game theory class? Should we try to create a club or something? Exactly. Try to create a club. That is a very good way of doing it. I swear, there's tons of stuff. Ignore that. Can you hear that? Actually, I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one who can hear that. Well, it's done now. But yeah, if you can't create a class, if there isn't a class, try to create a club. Try to find usually like a math teacher or a computer science teacher or something. Will know about this. Or a science teacher, like the guy who taught me game theory was actually my physics teacher. So just if you need like a teacher to deal with this, I recommend just going through math, science, and computer science teachers and just asking, hey, do you know anything about game theory? So yeah, thanks a lot. Would AP Stats be even better? And like an AP Stats teacher might know about game theory, but AP Stats is not a game theory class. I mean, it's certainly important. And yeah, pay attention to that chat message. Everybody go to the Google form and do the thing. So yeah, the stats teacher might know. That's an AP stats teacher probably would know. But if you have like an AP computer science teacher, they might also know. Just if you know any teachers who you like and teach like some sort of STEM class, just go to them, right? They'll probably know some stuff. So thank you all for coming, and I really had a lot of fun teaching a class. This is my first time teaching in class, so I hope you all liked me. I hope this wasn't a slog. So thanks for coming. Do more game theory. That's all I'm gonna say. So yeah, thanks for coming. I'm gonna stop recording now.